Welcome to the Bree Pod. I'm here with Tanya Demers, licensed social worker and anxiety life coach. Hi, Tanya.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you here today. I met you through my mutual friend, Priscilla, and ever since then, I feel like we've had such a great relationship, and I had to bring you on to talk about your passion for being a licensed social worker and anxiety life coach. So tell us about that.
Thank you, Bree. Absolutely. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very excited. So what what got you into your passion?
Well, it's kind of been not only a personal journey but a professional journey as well. So I'll start out with my personal journey. I'm very open to the fact that I have suffered from anxiety for a long time, and I've approached it as I have those defining moments in my life where anxiety has absolutely been a part of my life, and I'm gracious for it now. But when you're going through it, you really don't treat it as a gift like you should. Some of my defining moments were I had applied for a job. And as I was finishing the job interview, I was taken on a tour, which is very typical for an employment interview. And the person who was taking me for a tour became very clear that I was not the candidate that he wanted for the job. Interestingly enough, it wasn't a social work job, which I was very comfortable with. It was actually a job in law enforcement. And I will clearly say that I don't meet the typical mode or model for a law enforcement job. But I thought, hey, this sounds like a really cool job. What ended up happening is I found that I was getting very anxious throughout the tour. And I was thinking, this person really is starting to fear is starting to come up. And I was letting somebody else cause me, or what I thought caused me to feel anxious. But obviously, I was letting myself feel very anxious, and I was letting fear come into my life. And I actually almost let that anxiety and fear turn away, which was one of the best jobs that I had had. And so that was one of my defining moments. I thought, I'm letting somebody else trigger my fear and anxiety, which I already had anxiety about just the job, the interview, that sort of thing. So I thought, no, that's not the way I'm going to roll in life. And so I knew that I live with anxiety. I learned to live with it. I don't live within it. So that was one of the defining moments. So my second defining moment, and this may sound like a very sad story, but hang in with me, guys, because it has a beautiful ending. So my second moment was I suffered a great loss in my life. My first pregnancy terminated at 26 and a half weeks. And unfortunately, although we were able to get my son over to a NICU in another state, he did not survive. So then on my next pregnancy, as one can imagine, if you already have anxiety or prone to some anxious thoughts and worry, my next pregnancy, I absolutely zipped up anxiety like a parka. I wore it with pride. If I could worry about something, then I wasn't necessarily worrying about the pregnancy or the outcome of that pregnancy. And so I then learned after my daughter was born that I was still anxious. And I thought, well, wait a second. How am I still anxious? My whole goal of being, worried and panicked and anxious throughout this pregnancy was to have this beautiful child, which I had. Well, what I came to realize was anxiety felt familiar in my life. It felt comfortable. It was something that I had learned to live with, that I had thought was okay. And it was my primary coping technique. Because let me tell you, I got really good at being anxious. And I let that drive me for a lot of decisions. So, and I got to tell everybody, I was a licensed social worker at the time of all of this in my life. I had gone through, getting my master's. And so I was well trained, well versed in all of this, but it's a lot different when you're working with people versus taking your own advice. So here I was, my world was full of anxiety. And so I started to be this mother. And I remember one point, we had a public health nurse come in because, as luck would have it, my second child was born 6 weeks premature, but healthy. And she's beautiful and a happy, healthy 16-year-old today. But the health workers showed up because when you have a preemie, they'd like to come to the house and make sure everything's going well. And I had her in a little bouncy seat, and she was born in October, and it really wasn't that cold, but I had this little space heater. So I had her all wrapped up in this blanket. I had this little space heater making sure her bubble was, oh, probably 80 degrees. And the health worker said, "What are you?" And I said, "Well, I want to make sure that she's warm." And she's like, "She's plenty warm. Put a blanket on her. She's fine. Turn off that heater." So those were the defining moments where I had to wake up and I had to say, oh my gosh, I have got to get control of this anxiety. So that's really when I delved deep into it. Now I'm going to tell you my professional story was, again, once of making, I felt, some grave mistakes, but I've learned from them. So what happened is, I remember very clearly, I had a client who was in front of me. She presented with severe anxiety. She came in and I kept asking the questions, well, what triggered your anxiety? What's the life event? What's the defining moment? And she kept saying, I don't know. I don't know. So then I started to teach her, well, stop saying, I don't know. You've got to come up with it. And she really couldn't. And so I thought, okay, so this is true and genuine. She really doesn't know what's triggering her anxiety. So I knew that I had to do some education, because if I didn't know what was going on when you work with a client, you've got to figure this out. You can't just say, I've decided that, your anxiety doesn't fit my treatment mode. So what happened as a result of that, I really delved deep into neuroscience. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I had to start to study the brain. I had learned social work. I was a cognitive behavioral therapist. So for me, cognitive means thinking. Obviously, behavioral is behavior. So I kept thinking, well, the brain thinks, so we should be able to link this. What I found out is that there are two brain structures that are very unique to anxiety. And knowing what brain structure is causing a client's anxiety is really pivotal to treating them. And so I know we're going to talk about, how I do this differently with anxiety. So I've kind of already given you a little foreshadowing to that. But as a result of that, I absolutely learned that I needed to take a different approach. And so I learned amazing things about anxiety. And so then what happens is I start to research it, and I'm trying to find out what is being helpful for people. And I'm finding that online or in therapy, you tend to get whatever therapist likes, whatever coach likes. They like to teach that component. They don't like to go outside of the box. You can't do that when you work with people. People are unique. Their situations are unique. You have to get to know your person. I equate it to, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. You can try, but I can tell you right now, you can't do it. So that is what I started to do. I thought there's no really good happy marriage for the treatment of anxiety. It's either all this social work or it's all the coaching, but there needs to be a happy marriage. And so there needs to be, with cognitive behavioral therapy, needs to be combined with mindset. And so that was my passion. I couldn't find it. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it. And how I did it was, I said, I'm going to start to do lives. I'm going to start to get out there. I have no idea how to work the computer. I'm lucky that I can figure out how to work Zoom or a FaceTime. And so I said, if I don't know how to do it, then I'm going to learn how to do it. And so that is literally how my passion came about. Now, for you guys who have anxiety, you're going to love this story. So the first time I'm doing live, now I have to tell you, of course, I sat and I talked and I sat and I talked. I'm like, I've got to push this live video. I've got to just start it. And with anxiety and with the amygdala, specifically with anxiety, you have the response where you're going to pee your pants. So I am literally sitting there during my first live talk, so anxious that I'm thinking, well, if I pee my pants, I'm going to pee my pants because I'm going to get through this live. I know I can do it. And so I've done that. I think I'm rolling on I think over a year now, where I come on and I talk, and it's amazing because you guys, when you have anxiety, we tend to let it let it shelter us. It causes us not to take action, and because it feels familiar. And so we need to go into the unfamiliar to have it feel familiar. So that was a long explanation, Bree, but that is my personal and professional passion with anxiety. And so I have to bring it into the world. I feel that if I don't, then I'm doing a misjustice, and I won't go through life knowing that.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us because it really gives a perspective on anxiety in both personal and professional. So that's really nice to have, especially with anxiety and hearing it. It
Hmm.
gives me anxiety thinking about what you did.
Hmm. So
But
true.
uh, but that's what I love about bringing you on here is because so many people have anxiety and don't
Hmm.
know what to do with it or
Hmm.
how to, um, I don't know, like, I don't wanna say live with it, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, so
That's a beautiful way of saying it. Absolutely. Because Bree, we have anxiety, first of all, because it kept us alive. And so we have to realize that anxiety, we have it, our brain has it because it's protective of us. And I don't want women to think for 1 minute that I'm not talking about being anxious, especially women. We need to trust our anxiety because our anxiety will keep us safe. And so when people come to me and say, I want you to help me so I no longer have anxiety, I say, well, guess what, folks? You've come to the wrong place because you need anxiety in your life. It is what keeps you from jumping off a cliff without a parachute. It's knowing that the landing's not going to be great. So you need to have it. But I love when you say to live with it. Yes, because we have to live with it.
yeah. I, I always love your analogies because it's easier to grasp what you mean and you can relate to that. Like, yeah, you're right. Like living with it is okay. And just getting I think what's cool is I believe every Thursday you go live and you share that
I do.
different aspects of anxiety. So
Mhm.
share with us what are like misconceptions people have about anxiety?
One of the biggest misconceptions with anxiety, I kind of shared that we think that we don't want it in our lives. Now, first of all, we know that anxiety can feel like living with some discomfort, and we don't like to feel discomfort. Remember, our the three things that we know about our motivation is that we don't want to have pain, we don't want to be in discomfort, and we want to do things that are easy.
Yep.
And so this is one of the huge misconceptions is that anxiety is some evil monster that's in the room. And so that's the first thing that I take off the table is it's absolutely not. That we have to learn to live with it. Now, first of all, of course, always start with psychoeducation that we talk about. We need to identify where your anxiety comes from. And here's where I'm totally, not totally different, because I'm sure there's people out there that have the same, pattern as me as far as treatment or coaching goes. But there are those two brain structures. The amygdala is the fight, flight, and freeze response part of the brain. That's the immediate anxiety. That is the anxiety that you can't say, geez, I had a trigger, I thought long about it. And there's the cortex part of the brain, that's the thinking part of the brain. So the first thing that I do is I figure out, where does your anxiety come from? Is it from the amygdala? Is it from the cortex? Because if I try to treat somebody or coach somebody who's having amygdala fired anxiety, they're going to be looking at me going, I don't know what you're talking about. And they truly don't know. So let me give you, I love my analogies.
Yes.
So it's like driving down the road and you see something out of the side of the side of your vision. So you slam on the brakes. Okay. Now, what happens is that's an immediate response because you don't really know what it is. Your mind's not said, geez, what could that be? Now, the cortex, the thinking part of the brain, says, geez, that looks like a set of eyeballs. And I know that eyeballs in the North Country meant that there's going to be a deer flying across the road. So I'm going to slow down to make sure there's no deer crossing. So that's literally how either the amygdala or the cortex part of anxiety. So this is what we do. If you have amygdala anxiety, then I'm going to coach and treat you differently. We're going to have to get you to calm first. I'm going to have to help you to learn to breathe, learn to be grounded, learn to focus. If it's the cortex, remember that was always my strength. Coming out as a social worker, boy, we love the thinking part of the brain. Then we get to work on different things like what are your thought errors? What are your, distortions? What are you going on from there? So I take this very happy marriage. I find out where your anxiety comes from. And no, I don't hook you up to electrodes. We literally will give you a checklist. We'll ask you some questions. And then I go from there. Everything is individual about what do we do first. And so I have to tell you that I mix mindset and cognitive behavioral therapy. Mindset is huge when it comes to anxiety. So this is another misconception. The misconception is that if you're going into treatment, that everything has to be very clinical. That's not at all how I approach anxiety. Not clinical doesn't work for everybody. So I actually do a holistic approach to anxiety. If I have somebody who wants total clinical, I'll do clinical. But let me tell you, there is a mind, body, and spiritual that comes with treatment of anything. And if you don't believe that, then you've got a misconnection going on. And we have to figure out that first. How do we combine those three beautiful things about ourselves to be the best person we can possibly be? So this is how I've grown from being a clinical social worker into, oh no, there's so much more that we need to learn and know about with anxiety. So
Oh,
that's kind of, yeah, that's a lot,
that's
isn't it?
wow. No, it's cool though because I didn't realize like the different types of anxiety. I mean,
Mhm,
I don't know a lot about it, even though I have it. I don't like, I guess I didn't do enough research on it for myself, but
mhm,
it's cool to hear this because a lot of us are like me and like, I don't know what to even
mhm,
do with it.
mhm. Absolutely. And imagine how frustrating it is when you come into treatment. And I have to tell you that I had total empathy for the woman that I was working with when I realized, oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't know everything. Of course, that was 20 years ago, so now I've learned so much. But and the frustration that so many people must experience when they go into treatment and people don't understand it and they want you to start thinking about something that you're not able really truly to think about yet. And so, yeah, so there's a different approach to it. Now, a lot of my folks, when they come in, they're a happy medium of both of them. They really can identify, so I know, I call it my ABCs of anxiety. And it's kind of funny because I call them team amygdala. My team B's, there's a team of both, and my team C is cortex. Isn't that cute? So that's how I've termed it, my ABCs of anxiety. But because I don't want anybody to ever get frustrated. It's sometimes a puzzle, especially when it comes to mental health. It's definitely a puzzle. And so we have to figure out, let's put the puzzle pieces together. Maybe we'll start with the outline like we always do. And we'll group things in the different colors that we need to. But that's really what it comes down to. So that's what I want to tell people, impress on people. If you're feeling frustrated, then maybe you just need a different approach to it. But that's the misconception that I feel with anxiety is a lot of people think that you can think your way through it. And if you're amygdala, if you're immediate, then you have to get down to getting your blood pressure down, getting calm, getting grounded, getting focused before you can go anywhere. And I am all about all different modalities of treatment. I don't just come in and give my modality, but another misconception to anxiety is that it's just meditation and mindfulness, and that I want people to somehow not think or have anything in their mind. And that is the furthest from the truth, because that is not what meditation or mindfulness is. It's actually the opposite. I want people to learn to be present, and I actually teach people to sit with discomfort, which is not so cool sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yes. This sometimes I'm sorry.
No, it's
Discomfort.
okay.
See, look, I can't even say it. Discomfort is I know in an exercise that we did together, we did that with some discomfort. And I remember being like, I
Hmm.
can't do that. No, I
Hmm.
can't do that. But
Hmm.
but it was good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so I would love for you to share what advice would you give those with anxiety and maybe for those that are looking for you and like how can they reach out to you as well? Yeah. That's a
Sure.
two-parted question.
Absolutely. This is my advice when it comes to anxiety. You get to decide if your anxiety is serving you a purpose or is it not serving you a purpose. And that's the big difference. And let me explain. So, for me, my anxiety, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So, what that means is that I have come to realize that there is no such thing as perfection. And that's my biggest advice that I'm going to give to anybody with anxiety, because a lot of times the need to be perfect is because with anxiety, especially, we can open it up to social phobias or any sort of anxiety, but in particular is the idea that if you say you do something, you go somewhere, you're going to make a fool out of yourself, you're going to humiliate yourself, that you're not going to be good enough. And I have to say that's one of the mantras that I teach everybody that I work with, is to say I am good enough, because when it comes to anxiety, it's one of those primary thoughts that we have. And so my advice is that you have to decide, is your anxiety causing you to take action? Is it causing you for inaction? And it goes along with, is it serving you a purpose or is it not serving you a purpose? So with my perfectionism, or I'm in recovery of my perfectionism, it would tend to drive me to be overly prepared. And interestingly enough, I have 2 sheets of notes in front of me. I've not had to use them, but before I even came onto the podcast, what I did was I had put down some of my thoughts. What that does to help me is that A, it helps to ground me, and B, it makes me feel like I'm more prepared. And so I have learned over the years that if my drive to be perfect, or what I perceive as perfect, if that drives me to be extra diligent, if it drives me to have the best resume walking into an interview, to have already asked myself the questions that I think I'm going to get asked, and I come across being prepared, then that's how my anxiety would drive me for purpose in my life. It drives me to action. The difference would be is that if I didn't go on the job interview because I was so afraid that I wasn't good enough, or that my resume wouldn't be good enough, or that I would say or do something really stupid. And so that's when your anxiety would drive you to inaction. Remember, we have to live with anxiety. It's because it keeps us safe. It's what our brain does. That's why it was there. It's not meant to make us happy. Our brains were not formed to make us happy. They were formed to make us survive. And so then we get to make the decision if we want to be happy, what goals we want, and how we want to progress with that. So that is my biggest advice. Now, my other advice is, if you're involved in anxiety, and maybe say you've been working with a coach or a therapist and it's been a long time. Now I'm going to say, people are going to say 3 months. I'm going to say within 3 months, if you're not seeing progress, if you're not feeling progress, then it's time to move on. You don't just have to like your therapist, but you have to be doing work and progressing with your therapist or your coach. And so many people be like, but I really like her. I really like him. And I love that. But if you're not progressing, if your anxiety is not getting better, if you're not learning some skills, I call it a tactical tool bag. That kind of brought me back to my law enforcement. I had a 12-year law enforcement career. And I call it my tactical tool bag of anxiety. If you're not learning those skills that you can use, then you do need to look forward. The biggest thing is out there, don't hide your anxiety. I don't mean that everybody has to walk around with a sign, but I have to tell you, I'm quite proud that my anxiety has led me in life from my defining moments into where I am today. And so many times we feel like we don't want to tell people that we're anxious. So we avoid people. That is the worst thing that you can do. So my advice is, like I said, you don't have to scream to the world in the Walmart grocery store, hey, everybody, I'm anxious. But don't hide it, because there's so much, we need a support. We need a tribe. We need to come together. We need to love each other and raise each other up. And so a lot of times, especially with anxiety, we hide it. We feel like we have to push it under the water like that beach ball. You're going to get that beach ball under the water, but I promise you, your anxiety is not going to stay there. If you don't deal with it, take it out, put it on the shelf for a little while, learn how to live with it. Your body is going to be affected. We know your mind definitely is going to be affected. And there's on all realms, including relationships and daily functioning. So my advice is, guys, is to get out there. find a support, find a tribe, find information. I'm doing a 30-day anxiety challenge. Today is day 20 of it. My name is The Bolster Way, and that's where you can find me. And it's the BOLSTERWAY, The Bolster Way. I've got a website. You can grab a free 30-day guideline. The workbook is there for you. You can find me on TikTok, either by doing hashtag Tanya Demers or hashtag The Bolster Way. The Bolster Way is my business name. That's what I've been since therapy. And it's interesting. The story comes about because it's my maiden name, Bolster. But if you look it up in the dictionary, how cool is this to have a social worker with a name that defines as a supportive, fluffy pillow? So I think that is awesome that my maiden name is a big fluffy pillow. I say that because, people will be like, oh my God, a bolster pillow. Yes. So that's how you can find me. I do every Thursday I come on at 8:15 on Facebook, The Bolster Way. And I talk about an anxiety topic. Like I said, every day I've been on doing an anxiety challenge. And I did this purposely for 30 days of things that wasn't going to cost you any money, because I know right now people don't have a lot of financial support, but that doesn't mean that you still can't challenge yourself and work on your anxiety every day. See, Bree, what happens when you let me talk about anxiety? I can go on and on and on for sure. So absolutely.
No, that's okay. I really appreciate you sharing all that. It's funny, I did not know that you had TikTok, so now I have to follow you.
And it's funny, Bree, because when I looked at TikTok for the past 30 days, I actually should name my page, Let's Look at the Hair for the past 30 days. There's days that I'm thinking, am I the same person? Depending on the angle of the camera, I can lose 20 pounds. I can add 20 pounds. My hair looks like I've gone through some major transformation some days. So yes, it's quite interesting. When you pull up TikTok, you're like, wow. Nope, it's been all in the past 30 days for sure.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know you had the 30-day challenge, but I'm sad I missed that. That's okay. I will keep
Absolutely, right?
I'll be more vigilant this time. But that's really cool. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing well, not everything, because there's so much on anxiety, but as much as that you could.
There's so much, right?
And I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, like you said, they try to hide it, or like the beach ball, which is always the best analogy, where you're like, I don't have it. No. Okay. Poof. Here's my panic attack now. And I think that's really important for everyone that's listening, that there are ways to live with it. And it's okay to say that we're going to live with it. It needs to become our friend, not our enemy. And that's what I think I've learned in my own anxiety journey, is like, if we make it an enemy, then it just like you said, it takes over the mind. And there have been times where like my body just wants to say, no, you don't want to do this. Like every time before a podcast, it's so sad, because I learned so much from these podcasts. Even though I'm the host, I learned so much. And before it, I'm like, nah, I don't really want to do it now. That means I have to talk. It means I have to do this. But every time I'm like, no, because you are blocking yourself, and that's not fair. So thank you so much for bringing a light shed on this subject. And the Bolster Way, follow it all.
Absolutely.
So this is the segment where I like to share 3 affirmations. And I would like to go with ones that you resonate with. So the way that this works, for anyone that is new or used to coming on here, you pick between a number of 1 and 3. And then whichever number you resonate with, that is your affirmation for the day. So if you resonate with group number 1, your affirmation is, peace begins within me. If you resonate with group number 2, your affirmation is my best is getting better. And then for those of you that resonate with number 3, your your affirmation is I love who I am becoming. And with that, you are loved, you are cherished, you are worthy, and I am proud of you. Until next time on the Brie Pod. Bye.